Hello everybody and welcome back to a brand new live stream. It's been about a week or so since our last one, but we're ready to go. We have a lot of ground to cover. We have Biden's State of the Union, which was kind of a disaster. We knew it was going to be a disaster, although we'll talk about the caveats and exactly what was said that needs to really be highlighted. Also, on top of that, we have Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis. Trump going just directly at Ron DeSantis, hitting him in as many places as he possibly can, just throwing stuff at the wall, seeing what sticks. We'll talk about what exactly did, but not only that, the guy that basically gave Trump all of this like Oppo research on DeSantis actually was from our Discord server, believe it or not, which you could actually join at redeaglepatriot.com. But it's crazy thinking about how that guy on Truth Social was the guy that Trump was actually just quote tweeting and attacking Ron DeSantis for, which kind of threw Twitter into a whole, spiral, which that was the news story of the day before the State of the Union, which we're going to get to first, and then we'll kind of get to the 2024 stuff as we usually do. We'll get to Super Chats, but also, I just like to say, this is actually not today, but yesterday was the 4-year anniversary of the first ever Red Eagle Politics upload to this YouTube channel. It's been a long time coming. We started off very small, and back in the day, just one video, it kind of just boomed a little bit, so to speak. And now we have over 150,000 YouTube subscribers. We're growing. We keep managing to stay afloat here, and that's a very good thing. So I'd like to thank you guys. It's been a great 4 years. Hopefully this year is going to be a very instrumental one, very important one. It has to be for not just this channel, but also this country. And speaking of this country and the State of the Union, Joe Biden decided to go out there and gaslight the American public for over an hour. And we're going to talk about what exactly was said. We're going to talk about the highlights. We're not going to get to everything in the speech, obviously. We understand that there were some things that were talked about that are objectively bipartisan, that every administration does tend to get done these little things. They happen under Trump, under Biden, whatever. You talk about, for example, the fact that he's talking about getting rid of like resort fees and ticket fees or whatever. Still hasn't really happened to my knowledge. But either way, it is interesting to see him highlight that kind of stuff. He talked about construction materials being made in America. I don't exactly know what he was referencing, but if that's true, that's good. I'm not going to counter-signal that, although we could talk about the fact that the Overton window has moved to the point where even the liberal opposition and these free trade neoliberals like Joe Biden get to go out there on the national stage, and even they have to submit to our narrative regarding trade, which I think is a good thing. But furthermore, there's a lot we have to talk about Biden's speech and what exactly was said. Now, I also will say this. There was not a lot of, 1/6 mentions or democracy or Ukraine. And in the tweet I put up on the screen, I basically said, politically speaking, he's made worse speeches in the past year. This is objectively true. He's made way worse speeches than this one. There were gaffes. I mean, what did he say? We have to have a conversion. What the hell does that even mean? And he basically said a lot of other intelligible things throughout the speech. But it's Biden. You anticipate that's going to happen at this point. It's sad that that's what we have to deal with. But yeah, the guy's got some sort of mental condition. The guy's 80 years old. I think he's the first 80-year-old in history to deliver a State of the Union speech in this country, which really is saying something. But furthermore, I've seen worse speeches from him. And politically speaking, this is a non-factor, basically. It's probably going to anger Republicans based off of what was said. Now, furthermore, I will say that just because that is true, it doesn't mean that what was said was accurate or that it was necessarily a good speech or that I'm going to praise it, because there's nothing really to praise, and we're going to talk about why. So, first of all, the guy goes up there and he talks about, I got all of this stuff done for bipartisanship, basically, except he said it in a less energetic way than I just said it there. So he says, what is he referring to? Election law legislation, which again is not something that's universally agreed upon. Mainly the Dems, and you have like a little bit of rhinos in the mix as well that happen to back that the like electoral count act or whatever he talked about. You have the VAWA. Obviously on paper it sounds good. You're preventing violence against women. But what does the bill exactly do? What does the specific reauthorization of it do? Well, there are clauses that allow men into women's shelters and other things like that that are not exactly so bipartisan on the surface. In fact, a lot of these pieces of legislation that Biden signed that were so-called bipartisan 20, 30 years ago, even he wouldn't touch it. The establishment of the Democrat Party wouldn't touch it. But now you have these Republicans just bending over for Brandon, basically, and giving him and the liberals anything that they possibly want. And that's a problem. You talk about how the Overton window is shifting in this country. It's only shifting in one direction. Obviously, we could talk about, maybe Trump on trade is shifting that Overton window. Okay, well, I think that's good for Republican, election prospects in the future in a state like Ohio. But furthermore, you look into what Biden has exactly had to say about a lot of things and social issues. The Overton window vastly within the whole uniparty is shifting completely to the left on social issues. He also mentioned the whole gay marriage bill that basically established and enshrined gay marriage into law. Again, this is something that even Biden wouldn't touch himself until 2012. He would not touch this issue. But now you see what's exactly happening. If you don't support this, you're going to be cast out of politics. But if you did support this stuff 30, 40 years ago, you would have been cast out of politics. But now it's the inverse because Republicans are losers. They bend over, they cave, they don't know how to win. They're always on the back foot. The Democrats don't do this. Even these Democrats in red districts, like R+10 districts, they're voting with Biden 100% of the time. They are staunch Democrats on these issues. The only exception I think you'd see is possibly somebody like Jared Golden. But everybody else on nearly every single issue, you look into this and what exactly do you see? You see Democrats, they don't care about electability. They don't have to. But Republicans cave. And I think Biden highlighting that kind of, shined a light on that as well. But there's plenty of other things that Biden said during his speech that exactly were inaccurate or downright terrifying, and we're going to cover them. We talk about the fact that he says wages are rising, and even PolitiFact is hitting him with a half-true, which basically would get a Republican mostly false. But he says wages are rising, but in reality, inflation is rising faster, so it doesn't exactly matter. Same thing with job creation. You're coming out of COVID, of course. How many jobs did Trump create in his last few months in office? Like a ridiculous amount of jobs. But was that really, something that could really be designated under the guise of job creation? Or was that, we're just reopening so people are technically getting jobs back? Whatever. And you look at the wages, compare them to inflation, they're very stagnant, which was not the case under Donald Trump. It was not the case under Trump for the past 2 years. Donald Trump, the greatest president of our lifetimes. I said that in my video, which is objectively true. At least if you are anyone that is remotely center-right and not a total crazed war hawk, it would be objectively true. Some people didn't like that, but what can I say? But furthermore, what we do know is that Biden also went out there, he did a little bit more gaslighting, a little bit more fear-mongering, talking about how Republicans are going to cut your Medicaid and your Medicare and your Social Security. Now, I will say that there are Republicans that do this stupid thing where they talk about it on the campaign trail, and it's used against them, and there's plenty of voters that they could possibly get on their side where they don't get it. And obviously, there's a lot of Republicans who support those things, or at least nominally support those things. Yes, I understand the case for privatizing Social Security. Might get myself in trouble in the future, politically speaking, by saying it, but it is true. I don't like the way that the pyramid is exactly tilting, kind of like a pyramid scheme when it comes to Social Security. However, it's very unpopular if you're going to be talking about privatizing it, even if it would lead to more gains. It's still unpopular. Should it be? No, but still, there's no reason to talk about it, but a lot of Republicans don't, so it is kind of fear-mongering. They do twist words like that, and they've been able to do so very successfully. There's a reason why Blake Masters ran so far behind some of the other candidates. Yes, I know he was outspent like 90-15 or some ridiculous number like that. It was insane. But still, if you're talking about those issues, it's not going to help. Same thing with Don Bolduc up in New Hampshire. Probably would have lost by a lot less if Social Security was not something that he decided to mention. But still, I will say that it is fear-mongering. Nobody's exactly coming for it, but Republicans in the future need to not be dumb about these things. They need to not bring them up. They need to not mention cutting them because it's not popular. And there's plenty of voters who kind of soft agree with the right culturally, but they do care more about these issues. And it might not seem like they do, but those voters, the key voters in swing states, look at Trump. Look what Trump did back in 2016. He said, I'll protect your Social Security. I'll protect your Medicare. And that is a lot different from somebody that's talked about cutting Social Security their whole career, like a lot of establishment Republicans have, including Ron DeSantis, which might cause problems electorally. Notice how a lot of these electabros won't exactly talk about his past, which is interesting. But furthermore, we'll get back to Biden. You saw the fact that he lost control as that was going on because he was getting booed. You saw MTG yell at him. You saw Andy Ogles out of Tennessee, one of the underrated new arrivals as well, decided to go out there and kind of yell at Brandon Biden, whatever you want to call him. He did lose control there, which is interesting. And it's obviously just shows that he's not somebody who's a strong leader. He doesn't really know how to command a room, even of his own technically colleagues, in what is supposed to be a very formal event, a very formal speech. But what can I say? And that wasn't the whole thing either. I mean, it gets deeper than that. Then he went on and he was gaslighting the public about Tyree Nichols, or however you pronounce his name. And he had his parents, because that's the guy, for those who don't know, who got, I believe, killed at the hands of like 5 black police officers in Tennessee, was it? And it's crazy because this is another gaslight. What did Biden do? He went out there and he said, this is a racist attack. And he said, I don't have to give my kids the talk about how to handle themselves around a police officer, which is just blatant racist, anti-white gaslighting of the American public. If anybody actually knows the fact of the case, no officer that was involved in that case was white. Anybody who knows statistics or has looked deep into these studies, the left always likes to reference studies, but you actually look into the studies and what they have to say about this in terms of the, rate per 100,000 interactions with the police officer or whatever, the rate of a white person getting killed that's unarmed is actually a little bit higher or statistically the same as a black person getting killed. I mean, we've been talking about this for how long? It's so tiring. I mean, this has been a thing that's been going on since like 2014 or so, but Biden, again, still gaslighting the American public. And it's just like that stuff doesn't really pan out too well, and it shouldn't. And that's how they view this country. Everything is white people's fault. It's white supremacy, even when no white person is even involved. Whether this case, there's more to the story or not. I don't know what there is to the story. Looked bad initially, but it's like, okay, well, so did the Floyd stuff, and then the more information came out. So we'll have to see what happens on that front. But either way, it's just using this incident. And like they just ran out of incidents to use, so much so to the point where they're using an incident where none of the police involved happened to be white. I believe all of them were black, or maybe they had some like Hispanic cops involved. I don't know. That's beside the point. But either way, it is what it is. It's just unsurprising divisiveness and just anti-white gaslighting from Biden, which is exactly what his administration has been doing its entire tenure. So furthermore, he goes out there and he talks about cutting insulin when Trump was actually the one or cut prices for insulin, I should say. And you talk about Big Pharma. He's acting like he's the one taking on Big Pharma. He's the one that's going out there. He's shilling for Pfizer. He's shilling for Moderna, J&J, all the jabs, you name it, nonstop. It's insane. It's insanity. But furthermore, what else can we say? He never mentioned immigration, didn't really mention immigration at all, which again, you have a border crisis. Immigration was not mentioned, despite the fact that it's a very important part of the state of our union, because we've never seen anything like it before. And that's the way that it is. I've never seen anything like it before. But it doesn't matter. You have like 5 million illegal aliens. We don't know who they are, pouring across the southern border over the past few years, ever since Biden got rid of Remain in Mexico, which it's directly his fault. Apparently, he doesn't mention it or bring it up because that's a part of the long game. He wants to have these people here. He wants to naturalize them. And what is he going to do? He is going to make them citizens eventually, or another Democrat administration will, or even a Republican administration, knowing how they tend to cave to these corporations or whatever when it comes to the whole immigration issue. They like the cheap labor. Their donors like mass immigration too. They might do a compromise, make some of these people naturalized. It's going to doom Republicans in the future, electorally speaking. I think 2022 kind of definitely shined a light on that as well. Doesn't seem like you're going to be seeing this massive, huge Hispanic realignment. And even though you see a little bit of it in the, parts of South Texas or whatever, those people have been here for a long time. They are Tejanos. They're not necessarily, Mexican-American immigrants. They've lived in South Texas. Their allegiance is to Texas more. So those are the voters that turned out for Trump. It wasn't necessarily like these migrants or these second or, even some third and fourth generation immigrants do tend to vote more Republican, but that's beside the point. But Biden did kind of hint that he wanted amnesty when he did bring up immigration, and that kind of does let you know that he is indeed playing the long game. He mentioned fentanyl, didn't blame the border for it, didn't really blame China for it. He did kind of mention China a little bit here and there. He didn't really mention the balloon, even though I don't think the balloon is as big of a deal as a lot of people did tend to make it out to be. That's kind of why I didn't really talk about it too much. Definitely, you could say it's a national security issue, but it's very evident that China has ways to access your information. They don't need to fly a balloon over rural Montana to do it. I think it was intentional. I think that they were trying to gaslight America the same way that Biden did with his speech, one could say. But either way, it's like not the biggest issue. But I will say Biden also went out of his way to talk about how we need to go out there and protect transgender youth. That's what he said in his speech. Yeah, this is completely bipartisan stuff. If you talked about these issues to the average voter 20 years ago, that you talk about President Joe Biden is going to be out there and he's going to be talking about protecting the right for parents to allow children to mutilate their own genitals, they would look at you like you are a crazy person. They would look at you like you are insane. But now, especially 5-10 years from now, even on the right in some instances, if we don't change the trajectory of where we're going, people are going to be looking at you like you're crazy if you say the opposite. If I talk about how I think the gay marriage is wrong and that it's technically leading to a negative slippery slope, a good quarter to a fifth or a quarter to about a third of this chat is going to say, well, I don't care about this issue. And it's like that issue leads to these issues, and that's the way that it works 100% of the time. That's exactly how it pans out. It is a slippery slope. It is not a fallacy. That is actually a fallacy that it is, and that's the way it works. So what can I say? It's just not really hitting the right notes. Also, he did bring up banning assault weapons. Still doesn't exactly indicate what they are. Usually when people talk about assault weapons, they're talking about AR-15s, which is a standard weapon that people use. They use it for home defense. They use it at the range. It's lightweight. It's fun. It's easy. There's nothing wrong with it. It's one of the few guns that I've shot. Have a couple at the house for home defense. There's nothing wrong with it. But apparently Biden wants to get rid of it, and definitely that's going to be a major issue. And obviously gun control doesn't really work. We know it doesn't work. And you take away those AR-15s or the assault weapons, what are people exactly going to use? There was a time where we had very little gun control in this country. You had students in high schools that would bring their rifles to school. It wasn't even a problem. But now you have a problem with mass shootings because it's not because of guns. It's because you have a problem with the current state of the society. You have a problem with mental illnesses. You didn't even have the term mass shooting even be used until like, the 1990s, the 2000s. This is a very big problem. What are they trying to do? They are trying to take away your right to basically just do normal things, basically, because that's all it is. I mean, this is something that was considered normal for quite some time. You have problems that happen in society for a multitude of reasons. Now Biden is coming directly for the law-abiding citizens, basically tens of millions of law-abiding gun owners, basically. That's it. So what can I say? All right, we're 20 minutes in. I want to get to the super chats. I also want to get to some of this Trump stuff. Trump actually going out of his way to retweet a bunch of tweets, or truths, I should say, because it was on Truth Social, that were made by our very own Magnanimous from the Red Eagle Politics Discord server. I mean, this is what the former president spent his time doing. We're going to talk about this objectively. My take on this is probably not going to please everybody, even though it is an objectively correct take by all metrics. But we are going to talk about these posts that were made by Donald Trump about DeSantis. But we are going to get to the super chats first, and then we are going to talk about this from an objective perspective. Do keep that in mind. That's what we'll try to do. But all right, we got to go back to the top, and I think that's what the first super chat of the night said, actually brought up 50. He sent 50. Thank you to, let's see, Red Massachusetts. Thank you, Red Massachusetts, for the 50. Opinion on Trump calling DeSantis a pedo. I think it's unneeded. Also, I'm worried if DeSantis becomes the nominee, he doesn't get the rural turnout in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. Do you think if Trump endorses DeSantis, DeSantis gets the rural turnout against Biden? Well, thank you for the super chat. We're going to dive into this in a second. I just got to have a little bit of a water break here. But no, this is true. And I guess this ties into the next discussion. I don't want to get too far ahead, but we'll kind of touch on it now, and then we'll touch on it in a little bit. But either way, this is important to bring up because Trump goes out there and he doesn't really get attacked by DeSantis. People were saying DeSantis attacked Trump today or was trolling Trump today because he had like his news show that was like called Truth something, and he had like a logo in the background that kind of vaguely did look like the Truth Social logo. And that is true that he did that. And he had a lawyer on who represented, I believe, Dominion voting, whatever. I mean, everybody knows about that whole ordeal, but it is true that this is also an attorney who represented Project Veritas, who represented Sarah Palin, a lot of right-wing people. I don't know if Trump saw that. I mean, a lot of people were talking about that. I don't think this was in direct response to that necessarily. But either way, Trump did go out there and make these comments about Governor Ron DeSantis, which, again, were very egregious allegations, or at least he framed them as egregious allegations, because this is a tweet from Magnanimous, or a truth post, I should say, and it says, here's Ron Sanctimonious grooming high school girls with alcohol as a teacher, because DeSantis was a teacher back when he was in his early 20s. Here he is at a party. Now, keep in mind, this picture, from what I understand, even when it was released by the Democrats, was basically when DeSantis was, I believe, like 19, 20. He was in college. These girls were like seniors in high school or whatever. Like, I don't really care about that. Like, what difference does it make? Why is this a big deal? It wasn't a big deal then. It's not a big deal now. It's objectively just not a big deal whatsoever. I mean, the guy's just out there partying with people that are roughly within his own age range. And it's like, Trump says, that's not Ron, is it? He would never do such a thing. So he's trolling DeSantis, basically. He's doing a little bit of trolling. He's going out there reposting this like meme of DeSantis that's just like, it's just ridiculous. It's a ridiculous allegation. Like, even if he was a teacher and that his students like invited to parties. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say like that'd be the reason why I didn't oppose him, was that, oh, he was like friendly with his students, they invited him to some party. It's like, okay. Like, I'm not going to moral grandstand and like fake this outrage about it if his students wanted to like hang out with him. And it's like, oh, well, they're drinking or whatever. Well, he's the one in the picture from what I can tell with a drink in his hand. Who knows when that picture was taken? But I will say that, listen, everyone's been like 17, 18, 19, 20 at one point. It's what a lot of people drink. It's what happens. You know, it's not like they wouldn't be drinking if DeSantis wasn't there. But either way, I'm not going to say I condone it either. I don't condone it. I'm just saying it's not the biggest deal whatsoever. It's not like a deal breaker. It's not like I wouldn't support a politician because of it. In fact, it like humanizes them, if anything, because like this whole, like, it is true. The big argument against DeSantis is he's like a career politician. He's the one being groomed by the establishment into being like this perfect, squeaky clean guy. It's like, okay, if this is all the dirt they have on him, like as a person, whatever, you know, what can I say? I mean, if you're like that outraged by it, it's kind of fake moral outrage, even if it's something that you don't condone, because I don't condone it. But like, it is true that it's kind of like it's just nonsensical to attack him on it. I know Trump has a legitimate gripe with the people pushing DeSantis, and I will say that he did the right thing here when he retweeted or retruth magnanimous and said, why did DeSantis vote against Trump's border wall? Because we need some explanations, which we do. And the problem with that is, looking into it, who also voted against this bill? Paul Gosar, not MTG because she wasn't in Congress, but Andy Biggs, Matt Gaetz, like a lot of people like in the Freedom Caucus, because the bill gave amnesty. So, like I said, I'm somebody who supports Trump. Over DeSantis, I do. I just think that this was not the most effective attack line. There are legitimate gripes with DeSantis's record, especially on immigration. He can be attacked for some of his votes to raise visa caps, to allow, I believe, Obama to raise the rate of legal immigration to whatever he wanted. He, signed off on some resolutions like that. But either way, I will say that this is not entirely a legitimate attack line in terms of him not voting for border wall funding, because the reason why so many of the based Republicans, per se, rejected this bill is because, A, it gave amnesty to DACA, and B, because it technically allowed for like just a little bit of border wall funding that was nowhere near as enough to deal with the mini border crisis compared to the border crisis that we have right now. But it is what it is. Then Trump also attacked him on saying that he was glad about like 1-6 protesters being arrested, saying that, there were likely no feds involved, kind of dodging that fact. And honestly, like for that, yeah, that's kind of like a legitimate criticism with this. He doesn't like challenge the system in that regard too much. And Trump says, what about Antifa and BLM Ron? Which, again, DeSantis has done I think one of the best things DeSantis did as governor was the anti-riot bill. Some of his other bills are kind of a little bit overrated, but the anti-riot bill's pretty good. So I'm not going to knock him too much for that. But like, either way, I think that there's probably better things to attack DeSantis on. I think it's funny Trump retruthed this guy that we know from Discord, though, in our little server. But beyond that point, it's like, it is what it is, I will say. Like, in terms of Trump attacking DeSantis being a wise move, if DeSantis jumps in the race or starts attacking Trump, Trump needs to attack DeSantis, because that's what he does. If he's going to be getting it from DeSantis first, he needs to respond. He did this with a lot of people back in 2016, and it paid dividends for him politically. He insulted his way to the presidency. He proved little Jeb, or whatever you want to call him, wrong. But either way, our low energy Jeb, I think that was the nickname. But I will say that DeSantis, unlike some of these other rhinos, is kind of more well-liked within the base. And if DeSantis is not attacking Trump first, should he be out there just going and gunning for DeSantis, metaphorically speaking, 24/7, especially if he's not in the race? I'm not so sure it's a good idea, based off of some of the reactions I've seen from some of Trump's supporters, even some of his original supporters. Now, I will say, keep calling him a globalist, keep talking about his congressional record, accurately speaking, keep, going after his donors especially because those are the people that are propping him up. And his support base, the original support base that DeSantis has for president, the people that are just seething, foaming at the mouth anti-Trump, yeah, attack those people. Have people like me attack DeSantis. Probably just wait for DeSantis to jump in and act like you're the presumptive nominee. And if that's the case, I think Trump is probably going to cruise to the nomination. If he kind of just punches at DeSantis and people aren't really that receptive to it and he doubles down on it, keeps doing it, could cause problems for him, but we'll see. Especially get back on Twitter. I will say that to Trump, because not being on Twitter kind of does cut yourself off from the whole political ecosystem that you need. So in terms of the super chat saying, I'm worried if DeSantis becomes the nominee, he doesn't get the rural turnout. This is a problem that I have with Ron DeSantis. I haven't seen an argument necessarily in favor of it other than, oh, look at Youngkin or whatever. But then you look at somebody like Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania, or even Ron Johnson, who's kind of like a standard Republican in Wisconsin. He barely got by in like a midterm year. Like, you could say that Michaels held him down, but like either way, that was like the high profile race at the time. And there was a lot more ticket splitting in some of these House races that we did see too. But it's just interesting to me to really see people kind of ignore the full picture when it comes to turnout. Talk about trade. Talk about his Social Security stances. Like, if these things are talked about more, DeSantis is not going to be able to really get a foot in the door in some of these Rust Belt states. Like, yeah, he'll win Ohio, he'll win Iowa, maybe by over 5 points, but that doesn't mean he's necessarily going to go out there and take Wisconsin and take Pennsylvania. He definitely has no shot in Michigan. Like, especially because like a lot of those disaffected boomers, they don't like the career politicians. They don't. And in terms of presidential years, they're different than midterm years. Oh, well, Trump's candidates bombed in the Rust Belt. Okay, they had literally no financial support whatsoever. So, like, I mean, they were kind of just like grassroots candidates in states with very horrible Republican parties. Pennsylvania doesn't have a turnout apparatus. They allowed their Republican nominee for governor to get outspent 50-1 or some ridiculous number like that. The guy spent far less than the average, I think, congressional candidate spent in that race in the state. So, I mean, is what it is. I don't know about rural turnout for DeSantis. We'll have to see. I think he'll do very well in a place like Georgia compared to Trump, maybe by a couple of points or so. Even then, it's not a guarantee he wins it. I think he probably does better. He's a better fit for Arizona even. But I don't believe that Ron DeSantis is somebody who's going to be this electoral juggernaut who's going to wipe the board with Joe Biden. There's a lot of factors that go into this. And midterm years are not presidential years per se. And I'm not saying that Trump is going to have a cakewalk. I really don't believe that Trump will have a cakewalk. I think there's a very good chance that he gets the nomination. The GOP establishment does nothing to help him, and they'll do everything they can to sabotage him and help down ballot candidates. And as a result, he's not going to really have that much of a chance to win another term, but we'll have to see. Now, I will say it's funny that a lot of the whole like 2016 we want 2016 Trump back people, many of which were not active Trump supporters in the 2016 primary or even the general election in many cases, but they'll say we want Trump from 2016 back, and then Trump goes out there, attacks his political opponent in a 2016 manner. Keep in mind, he said wacky things about Ted Cruz's dad. Oh, he was involved in the assassination plot for JFK. That's what he said about Ted Cruz's dad at the time, just going out there and just being funny, taking a hammer to the political system at the time. And it's true, the fact that he's, attacking people in a similar manner now, they'll be like, oh, I'm not even supporting him in a general. And it's like, you got to be kidding me. Now, I will also say that I do think that the look of that is different than the look of this because, A, the base does tend to like DeSantis a lot more than those people, and because of the fact that DeSantis did not necessarily attack Trump first, so even in the eyes of a lot of Trump's base, it does kind of look like he's punching down, so to speak, at somebody who kind of just ignores him, but what can I say? All right, we're going to go to other super chats, but I think we kind of covered the second part of the show. I'm going to keep talking about it, but it's crazy what's going on in the whole Republican primary cycle that's going to be taking place. Trump going out there and just going ham at Ron DeSantis, unprovoked. We'll see what happens. We'll see if DeSantis responds. And if he doesn't, how is that going to play out politically for him? I mean, it's early on to the point where a lot of people aren't paying attention. These tweets or these truths or these comments are not going to influence any of the primaries, at least that are being made right now, about a year away from the first primaries that will be taking place. But still, if this continues, it's going to be something that's in the forefront of the Republican primary cycle. So, Gerald Armstrong says, didn't watch State of the Union, but I saw the clip of Biden getting booed into oblivion, accusing the GOP of Social Security cuts. Epic. Yes, that is true. And like I said, Republicans can take a lesson for this because Democrats are going to use it and they are going to hammer it home against them if they keep talking about Social Security, which they shouldn't be talking about. But it is misleading to say that, oh, Republicans, they're just gunning for your Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. It's not entirely how it really works. And there are arguments in favor of privatization that would increase the rate of return, but it is true that it is very unpopular and you're just like not allowed to talk about that in politics for some reason. I don't know exactly why, but we have to pick our battles as well. John Waffle, H2P, says Biden made himself look dumb at the end with the drug comments. It's sad people fall for that stuff. He's letting the drugs in. Yeah, and I don't think a lot of people really fall for it. Too many people do, but it's like, in terms of him using the drug issue like in an election to his advantage, he's not going to be able to do so effectively. Even if, putting it in a speech raises his approval rating by 0.01% in the meantime. Mr. Napoleon says Trump seems to be doing better with independents as of late. There was a poll that came out that had him winning them over Biden by 9. A lot of polls have had Trump winning with independents that have come out since after the 2020 election. They show him winning the popular vote against Biden, against Harris, against any Democrat. I don't know what to make of them given how bad polls were in 2022. I know presidential electorates are very different than midterm electorates, so you really can't use them as a litmus test 100% of the time, but we'll have to see. So Red Massachusetts says, some Dem tried to tell me that this was his best speech and how he sounded like a populist and how it made his reelection way more likely now. He said he could win Obama-Trump voters against DeSantis. Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. It is true, though, that the Democrats would be smart to wedge the Trump thing or the Trump factor against DeSantis, and if Biden does go up against DeSantis, if he gets the nomination, it might be wise for them to try and court Trump supporters by saying, for example, you're weak on trade, or you're weak on letting the drugs in or whatever, and talk about all these things. Oh, you're bad on foreign policy. Biden could go out there and say, I pulled the troops out of Afghanistan. You voted here, here, and here to send troops here, here, and here. Obviously, it's nonsense. Obviously, Biden pulled out the troops in the worst way possible. But if you're talking about what could win over independents and like ads, the people that don't pay attention, I don't know. There might be some truth to that. But I don't think that this speech in and of itself raises his reelection odds whatsoever. I don't know how many people even watched this speech, but it is really just what it is. John Waffle said Trump needs to get back on Twitter. This was a huge opportunity to get the attention, and I feel like this was a letdown. Well, he needs to be back on social media. He's not banned on anything. And as a result, there's no reason for him not to use it. He could at least post pictures of his Truth Social posts to Twitter. At least then his 80 to 90 million followers or so would at least see them. I don't know. That's just my take on it. And I'm not, like I said, I'm going to try to do my best to analyze this as objectively as possible without compromising any values, whatever. I'm not sold on Ron DeSantis. I said this in my last video. A lot of people didn't like it. And they were like, oh, he's a good governor. How are you not sold on this guy? He did this, this, and this. And it's like, okay, because you're good at the state level does not mean that you are going to be a competent executive at the national level. We don't have a lot of his track record at the national level, other than what we have seen from him in Congress, which was not too long ago, and kind of tells a little bit of a different story here and there, I will say. He was not the worst congressman. He's not a total rhino, but he wasn't really one of the better congressmen either. He wasn't like a member of the, I guess you would say, like the top 10, 15, 20 congressmen at the time. He was an average, one could even say below average Freedom Caucus member compared to the other people in the Freedom Caucus. Very generic at the time, but he did make a name for himself. He is a very skilled politician, and we will see how he navigates Trump and if he'll navigate Trump better than a lot of the other Republicans that were running back in 2016 did. Also, you have a different Trump. He's not the same Trump. Trump's detractors will say this. This is also technically true. He's not the same guy he was 6-7 years ago. We'll see how he plays out in current form on a debate stage because he's older. That's the way it is. Christopher Laurie says, all kept hearing was bipartisanship and coming together. We have to stop talking like this. The liberals never come together with us. Why should we? Exactly. And like I said, all of the bipartisan things that he brought up were things that would be laughed out of the room on the left 20, 30 years ago. And those were the things that Biden was touting as bipartisanship. And they'll put these names on it, like the Violence Against Women Act, which allows men and women shelters, or they'll talk about the Respect for Marriage Act, which basically semi-codifies Obergefell v. Hodges into law. Technically doesn't fully codify, but it mandates that states have to recognize marriages, quote unquote, that were conducted in other states. Again, redefining universally the definition of marriage, even if Obergefell v. Hodges rightfully gets overturned, and even if it does, they're probably gonna have it in every state anyways, because even the Republicans are just caving on these issues, and it's sad. But what can I say? Christopher Laurie says, okay, we already did that one. So we'll go to the next super chat. Let's see. Ghost of Franco says, what is your favorite music or music groups? Probably too many to name on one super chat, but there's just a lot. I like a lot of different kinds of music. I'm a Zoomer. Some people don't really like the fact that I do listen to rap from time to time, but I'm not going to shy away from it. It's true. Endeavor25 says, what's your first name? It's Jack. Everybody knows this by now, or they should. But I guess we have some new people who probably don't because I don't really bring it up 24/7. FM32047 says, will Trump's comments on Ron hurt him in Florida? If you're talking about electorally speaking, I wouldn't really say that they would hurt him in a general if he wins a primary. This is probably going to blow over at some point between now and the time where people are actually going to be voting. So I'm not necessarily sure it would hurt him. Now, if he's running for president and he gets the nomination and DeSantis is still governor and he's out there still attacking DeSantis, probably doesn't help him. But at the same time, he's going to win Florida by a decent amount. You could honestly thank DeSantis for that as well in terms of making the state more and more Republican compared to what it used to be. That is a state that is currently just veering right off a cliff. It's probably not going to vote for, let's say DeSantis gets the nomination. He's not going to win it by 20 at the presidential level. He's not going to outspend his Democrat opponent in the state by 20. But I think he could win it by 7-10, maybe even by more than that if he's popular as a governor, because that's basically the way it is. So Sam Matson said, would DeSantis lose Kenosha County? Probably not, but you don't need to lose Kenosha County to lose the state of Wisconsin. It's not necessarily a bellwether, and it is kind of veering right off a cliff to a certain degree. Maybe not so much as Racine, but I mean, you look at that was the one place where you actually had riots that kind of hurt or Democrats compared to what people anticipated. Because a lot of people said, oh, well, they're going to hurt the Democrats in Minnesota and Philadelphia, in the suburbs there, and they really didn't. So what can I say? Let's see. FM32047 says, I know Dems have this blue Texas wet dream and Cruz is far from perfect for the Senate, but I'll take him over Cornyn any day. There are GOP gems we could save for 2026, including Chip Roy against Cornyn. Yeah, and honestly, I don't know if really Ted Cruz is an example to use as an electoral juggernaut. You put somebody up there that is a hardliner and scandal plagued like Ken Paxton, even, they'd probably do better than Cruz would do because Cruz is not likable. And I don't think he's our worst senator. I don't particularly like him very much either, like as a person. He's just a little bit of a grifter. He's a little shifty. He doesn't really seem like a guy you can trust. And this is why he got this opposition building up against him in the 2016 primary. He probably would have lost to somebody like Hillary Clinton in the general election because he's just not not really capable of having that factor on his side. So you need the X factor. You need a little bit of charisma. And that's another problem with somebody like Ron DeSantis. Again, he kind of doesn't really have any either way. He's not unlikable, but he doesn't really have the charm that somebody like, even Trump has to a large degree, or somebody who would be even more charismatic. So, but either way, charisma doesn't necessarily win you election. Just being very competent and having a solid operation does. But somebody like Ted Cruz is kind of just universally looked upon in a very negative light, so to speak, and you could probably obviously see why. He doesn't really do himself any favors. The beard kind of helped him a little bit, though, I will say that, but yeah. Private Hazard says, what is your favorite video game? Honestly, Just Cause 2 might have to take the cake, and I know it's an old game. It was for the PS3, although I think you still could get it on PC, but just being that guy and just having all the artillery, just going around Panau, which is this fictional island in Southeast Asia where you have all of these different climates packed into a 20 or 40 square mile island. Just a lot of fun. The missions were fun. Blowing stuff up for the chaos points was fun. And that will always be my favorite video game of all time. It just will be. And I played Just Cause 3, never played Just Cause 4, heard it wasn't really that good. Just Cause 3 was fun because of the wingsuit, but, Just Cause 2 will always hold a special place in my history as a gamer, which is really not a very long history at all because most of you guys know that I'm not really that big into video games, but that's probably one of the only video games that I've actually played and enjoyed playing and would actually take the time to just play. Besides Madden franchise mode, of course, but that doesn't even count. So Nick A says, I think a Trump Hawley ticket's almost unbeatable. I'd be down for that. I would be. Bolt Up Baby says Trump in 24 for revenge against the deep state tyrants. And when people talk about this revenge tour, that is probably one of the most compelling arguments to sway undecided primary voters in favor of Trump. It's the guy feels wronged by the system. He feels screwed. He's going to go on this revenge tour. He's going to go out there and he is going to take a hammer to it because now he knows how to navigate it a little bit better. That's the argument. And people are going to sit back there and they're going to say, well, he's lost his touch. He still associates with rhinos or whatever, which, it's kind of true to an extent that he does that, but look at who is associating or who is backing DeSantis. And if you go with somebody like DeSantis and you really are somebody who wants to tear down the system, it's he's being funded by the system, propped up by the system. You reward your, initial supporters with roles, with staffing positions. Trump did this and it kind of bit him in the rear end from time to time. You look at people like Chris Christie, for example. But DeSantis doing this with a lot of these people, your administration, you're going to see a modernized Bush administration, or at best you're going to see Trump's first term, but with DeSantis at the helm. I think that's his ceiling, which again wouldn't even be that bad, but I think we need a little bit better than that. And I think we need better than Trump, honestly. I don't think Trump is going to be the end game either. I really don't. So Bailey Spangler, so just join the stream. When Biden was talking about economic issues, it really felt like he was plagiarizing 2016 Trump. And it did. And like I said, that's kind of a positive thing that's where the Overton window is moving on those issues. But again, a lot of it is empty. And that's going to be a large problem. Captain Cook, thank you for the 1. Wholesome DJ Aftershock says, Rufus, best friends forever, and lover with secret Asian DeSantis and sleeps with him in Florida. while Theocrat Rep live in trailer park with. Yeah, that sounds like a Rufus tweet. Like, they had the parody account for a while. And then you look at the tweets on the parody account, and then, like, Rufus's actual account would tweet, like, the same tweet from the parody account. It was like this guy is a walking L. And it's funny. And, like, he'll just post, like, the same old screenshot saying, Red Eagle is a buffin who knows nothing about politics. And, like, it's like me saying that certain candidates were more electable than other candidates. And it's like, a lot of that list is still true. Like, I agree, Mastriano really dropped the ball there. McSwain probably would have been a little bit more electable than him. Still would have lost, by the way. But it's like, okay, like, that's all you got. That's the best you're going to come back with. Okay, I think we're still in the clear here. DeSantis 2024 says, do you think a DeSantis versus Trump debate would be way different than 2016, since DeSantis is way different from Jeb and Ted Cruz, and since DeSantis is a lot like Trump in the way he speaks? I don't know if he's a lot like Trump in the way he speaks. He tries to be, but I mean, it's more like a focus group tested Trump when he does it. And I do think that it would be interesting to see how it plays out. You saw people like Rubio try to adopt, like, the insults, and it's like they did. Like, they were always like, Trump was the one that was hitting everyone, and that's true. But when they tried to hit back, like, he hit his hands or whatever, basically implying that he was not so well endowed. And then Trump said, no problem there, believe me. But it's like, I don't know how DeSantis would operate in the debate stage. I don't think he's really that charismatic. He let Gillum kind of, I guess you would say, not really take him to the cleaners, but I think Gillum probably at the time objectively had a little bit of the upper hand in the debate if you're talking about an objective debating standpoint. Obviously, DeSantis fans are going to say DeSantis won. I think DeSantis beat Christ in the debate. I don't think he, like, mopped the floor with him. And at the time, he had a lot of, ammunition that he could use. We did this as governor. We did this as governor. We did this as governor. I don't know how it would pan out. It'll also be interesting to see a 1v1 compared to a debate with the clown car. But it seems like we're headed for a clown car. Trump wants Nikki Haley to jump in. He wants these other people to jump in, and he should, because it's going to allow them to split the DeSantis vote, the never Trump vote, and allow Trump to have a majority of the primary electorate. But we'll see how it pans out. A year is a long time in politics. I mean, a few months is a very long time as well, even though you might say that's kind of like it's a 90-day period, like in real life or whatever. But in politics, that's an eternity. A couple of weeks, the climate can vastly shift. We've seen this time and time again throughout history, not just recent history, but history as a whole. DJ Aftershock says people think Roy Cooper will get 400 electoral votes against Trump. Nobody's going to get 400 electoral votes again unless Democrats get their amnesties passed, and maybe then, even then, they're not really guaranteed to do that. So a polarization is going to keep 2024 and most likely 2028 very, very close. Darth Vader 33 says, what do you think about Kari Lake and Linda McMahon's chances for any office, state, federal? Also, your thoughts on Governor Huckabee Sanders' response. I didn't fully watch the response. I caught some quotes. She talked about, like, new blood in the GOP. Kind of generic, even though I agree with that 100%. I do think that Linda McMahon's, like, old. I'm not saying, like, she's old in terms of old age. I don't know how old she really is. But in terms of politics, I haven't really heard that name. You have to go back to, like, 2010 to see when she ran for office last or whatever. Lake, I don't know what her future is. I mean, it's possible if Hobbs screws up monumentally, she would have some sort of a chance at a primary. You have a lot of people melting down at the prospects of her running for Senate because they think she'd lose a three-way race. I don't know how that would really pan out. She's polling better than Ducey in the three-way race. But again, polls are polls, and I don't really want to trust a poll ever again after the midterms, and I don't think anybody else will. So, yeah, we'll have to see how that pans out. This is America says, I believe DeSantis would be the better candidate to run for president. I honestly don't think Trump can be able to exactly make the win with all of these lies made up about him. He had a lot of lies made up about him in 2016, but the lies were like, oh, he's evil, he's like racist or whatever. That's what they would say about him. And it's like, they didn't stick. And I don't know what they're going to really make up about him this time, like democracy, insurrection, like that stuff doesn't stick. If he could win without that stuff, but he's got to focus on the right issues down the stretch. That much is very true. John Waffle, H2 Pieces, Hawley and Gosar are the future of the GOP after Trump. Well, Gosar's old himself. Like, he's probably got maybe another term left in him at the most. I do think that Hawley is here to stay. I think that the best realistic future of the GOP would mean that it would lean into a more, populist direction on certain things while still maintaining their core, initial goals in terms of being strong on the border. Rhetorically speaking, I know Hawley is. It's just not really his main brand 24/7, but they're gonna have to just bring these elements forward of Trumpism to a large degree, but focus on the right elements of it as well, not necessarily the arguments of it that are not going to resonate with the majority of the public. And you still got to maintain this guise of being a threat to the system, even if you have people a part of the system. It is very true we need base people in power. However, running somebody super based for governor who's never held political office before, who doesn't know how to navigate the political system, it could blow up in your face. It really could. If your campaign's not properly run, then guess what's going to happen? Well, you're going to lose. Doesn't matter how epic you are. And it's like we need people running for state rep, state senate, people that can, be elected to lower statewide offices, that can actually rise up, get name recognition, know how to learn and game the political system, and then they can take power, and then they could rise in the ranks, and they could keep doing things, they could keep networking, and then they could rise in the ranks from there, and then from there, and they keep going, and we're going to have a big bench by them. But right now we don't have a bench. Everybody in politics, for the most part, the best we could do that's a politician is either somebody like Hawley or like DeSantis. Like I said, if you talk about the politician, DeSantis, Youngkin, those are the names being floated. And it's nothing even against them, but I think we need a lot better than that if we actually want to save this country. And that much is very true. Not saying I wouldn't vote for these people if they were nominees in the future for president. I think people do need to vote. I think that voting against the Democrats is important. People that boycott elections don't get anything in return. We tried this with Georgia. Didn't work. I mean, it's very true. You look at what happened. They blamed Trump for that. They blamed us. They didn't blame the establishment. The establishment's never going to take the blame. So we got to work on that. Captain Cook's opinion on Trump's image with moderates and young voters. If he keeps the policy releases up, I think it's going to help him. The attacking DeSantis stuff, like I said, I'm not against it. There are legitimate grievances, and you have the donor class propping DeSantis up to be this nominee who appeals to the never-Trumpers. But at the end of the day, we also have to understand that we have to be smart about how we navigate it. Trump usually doesn't attack people that don't go after him first. So him going after him, feeling a little threatened in the eyes of a lot of people, it's not going to pan out well. And I say this as somebody who wants Trump to succeed, want him to do well. I think it's entertaining. I think it's funny. But is this going to help him get across the finish line in a primary if he stays on this trajectory? There's a long way to go. I say we'll see what happens. It's funny. It's fun to see, but we do have a long way to go. So like the stream, guys, we're going to keep going here for a little bit. We have member chats as well. Don't want to miss the member chats. But also subscribe if you have not yet subscribed. And also, if you guys have any suggestions for YouTube shorts or videos, feel free to send them via Super Chat. We could look into that as well. Based Cato says, thoughts on King of the Hill's return. I put a tweet out about this a while back, and I stand by it. And it's if they're going to bring it back and have it be just the way it was and kind of keep politics out of it for the most part, yeah, I think it's a good thing. But if they decide to go we're going to wokeify it route, and Hank Hill's going to be a Biden supporter, and all this other stuff, and it's no, that's not how the show really would pan out in reality. And I know Mike Judge is somebody who is kind of more right-leaning than a lot of other people in like Hollywood, for example. He's been on Alex Jones's show, even though he's kind of like been forced to say, I didn't really know what it was, even though he clearly knew what it was at the time. And he's not a fan of Trump, obviously. He's like a libertarian type, but be careful. We don't want them to go out of their way to necessarily wokeify something that has such a cultural significance as being something that's just inherently conservative in many degrees. And you might say, well, it's not really conservative or whatever, but it's like, it's a very mundane show. It's got a very mundane nature. It portrays conservatives in the show in a fairly positive light. It will poke fun at the quirks of certain characters, but it's funny. You sympathize with them. There's not really a whole lot of characters that you don't like in the show. Usually, if you like the show, you might like not like. Well, it's funny. Like, obviously, there's a few people that you don't like. You're not supposed to. You're not supposed to like John Redcorn, for example, because you obviously cheat. Dale's wife cheats on him with him, and you obviously aren't really supposed to like Peggy in the later seasons because she becomes like a feminist in a way, like a raging narcissist as well. Mainly after the plane injury, which is interesting. It's kind of like a conspiracy about the show, but I think there's a lot of validity to it because it gets progressively worse in later seasons. But I don't know if they're going to do the time jump or whatever. It's going to be interesting. But I am releasing another Texas documentary. It's the part 2. It's about kind of like the midterms and the future of the state politically. That'll be out maybe later this month, if not early next month. So we were not going to go on a 5-minute tangent about the show, but we're going to have to bring it up just a little bit, just maybe a one-liner or something like that. But John Waffle H2P says, how do you think the left would act if MTG or Boebert somehow became the first female president? It's a little bit of an uphill climb for, I think, either of them politically. I think they're both probably just going to remain in Congress for a while, at least from what I can tell. MTG, like, if she would be able to somehow like become viable, crush the GOP establishment, or like somehow find a way to become president, I don't know how the left would react. I mean, it's interesting. She caved hard on McCarthy, I will say. And I still like MTG. I still think she's a decent congresswoman, one of the better ones, but that was weird. Like, she just did that for what? So she could, like, appease the establishment, get, like, a committee assignment or something like that? I don't know. Yeah, I agree with SoCal. Says Mary Miller is better than MTG and Boebert. This is true. Mary Miller is very underrated. Oh, wait, she also overperformed, like, everybody, or a lot of people, compared to Trump's margin in the district in 2020. So, she's somebody who is fairly right-wing, and she's very good on a lot of issues and is not a pushover. And I don't know. I don't think she'd ever be president. She's kind of like old, actually. She doesn't look old. She looks good for her age, but she's like in her 60s, and she's in Illinois, so I don't think she'd ever get like a Senate seat or a statewide office. But I think Mary Miller is very underrated. I will say that much. But we'll see. So, yep. All right. Any last-minute super chats, feel free to send them in. Feel free to like the stream. Subscribe if you haven't subbed yet, but we're probably going to end in a few minutes here. I know it's getting late. It's almost 12:30 a.m. on the East Coast, so we kind of want to get the show on the road here, get out of here pretty soon. But we had a decent stream tonight, decent turnout. A lot of people kind of agreeing that Biden had yet another bit of a disastrous State of the Union. And it mainly just shows that the State of the Union is not strong. There was a lot of gaslighting, political shots. It was not nearly as egregious as I thought it would be. So you could say that that's a good thing for Biden because the expectations were set so low. And maybe we need to not set expectations low or high and just watch it play out. But either way, it was a disaster in terms of a lot of what was said. And it just shows bipartisanship in this country is not a real thing anymore. It's whatever the left wants. And compromise basically means compromising on traditional conservative right-wing principles and just giving the left whatever it wants at a slower pace than they would probably get it at if they maintained a little bit more power. That's all it is. And it's the uniparty in action. That's what the State of the Union is. Shout out to MTG and Andy Ogles for causing a little bit of a scene. That guy is the best Tennessee has to offer from what I understand, and he's new. And he's one of those new arrivals that's actually going out there and getting things done. So Lifo Foley says, is the GOP going to win back the state Senate in Virginia? We'll see. We got a long way to go. I think it's possible. The Virginia GOP tends to know what they're doing more so than the Republican parties of some other states. They got their election victories in 2021. Thomas Brasher says, if the Grammys last night isn't a sign that cultural libertarianism is dumb, I don't know what is. Yeah, and I didn't feel like it was something worth talking about because everybody's talked about it already, and nobody watches the Grammys. And if nobody mentioned what happened at the Grammys, like, nobody would know. And nobody would even care. But no, it is disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting what passes for entertainment nowadays. And obviously, one act is not the whole Grammys, but either way, that's symbolic. That's what it's talked about. We know what it is. It's just a self-filleting conference for the elites. They just give each other these awards. That's all it is. And you can't even base it fully on talent anymore because it's about promoting certain artists or creators, whatever. There's plenty of people that probably could fit those same roles that a lot of these artists and entertainers fit. That's the way it goes. Some of them are actually talented. I'm not trying to take that away from them, obviously, but let's be real here. The modern culture is not what it used to be even 5-10 years ago. So Santiago Cortez Matamoros says, do you think the young Cubans in Florida will make Florida more left-wing in the future? Will they be more left? I think on social issues, they're kind of liberal on some things from what I understand, but I don't know. I think that as of right now, they're just going to be pretty solid Republican votes. So Mary Hogan says Kash Patel would make a perfect viable VP. He won't cave. I mean, he's not really in politics from what I understand. I mean, like, he's in politics, but he's not, like, in office. I don't know if we're going to see an outsider pick for VP. I don't know how that would pan out. I'm pretty sure it's going to be somebody that would be already serving in office, whether Trump gets the nomination or somebody like Ron DeSantis gets the nomination. So, all right, I think we're going to end the stream. Like before you go, subscribe. I will see you guys maybe with a video tomorrow. We'll stream later this week. Wanted to stream on Tuesdays and Sundays, but this Sunday's the Super Bowl, so maybe we'll stream on Friday or Saturday. I don't know. No promises, but what can I say? Sam Madsen said, would Ron lose Jefferson County, Iowa? I don't even know where that is. Probably not if I haven't heard of it. I mean, it's a small county. It's in southeastern Ohio, or not Ohio, Iowa. I know those states have similar voting patterns now. Well, it actually was really close. He might. Depending on turnout, he might. I'd have to look at how it did in 2022. The Iowa GOP is more competent than the GOP in, like, Michigan or the GOP in, I don't know, Pennsylvania or even Wisconsin. So, all right, guys. I will see you guys sometime soon. Red Eagle out. Oh, wait. No. Apparently not. We have one more super chat, and this is an important one. A history guy says, your pick for who wins the Super Bowl? Eagles by a field goal. See you guys. Red Eagle out.